Hi, welcome to the evolution of disaster recovery hosted by Expedient and Zerto. I'll be the moderator for the call today. I'm Pam Sharma, Senior Partner Marketing Manager here at Zerto. But the guest speakers for the day are really who you're going to be hearing from. We have Harry Smith, our Chief Technology Evangelist from Zerto, who's going to talk to you and introduce the concept of disaster recovery. And then we have our speaker, Becky Mancuso, who's the Director of Marketing from Expedient, who's really going to talk to you about how you can be in market with disaster recovery as a service now, from one of our leading partners in the area. We are going to be looking and taking questions during this webinar, so if you have a question, go ahead and enter into the questions section. If there's time at the end of the call, we will take your questions live, and if we run out of time to go through them all, we will follow up with you after the webinar. With that, I'm going to hand over to Harry.
All right, thank you so much. Welcome everybody, thanks for joining. And today we're going to start off level setting with some terminology that you're probably familiar with. So we won't spend too much time on it, but BCDR, what is BCDR? It stands for business continuity, and that's the practice of really being able to continue your business seamlessly or as quickly as possible. So how do you get back up and running? It involves more than technology. It involves logistics around your business, and when there's an outage, how do I get access to things? Which phone do I use? All kinds of pieces. But when you talk about it in this context, you combine it with DR as one term usually, BCDR, and the DR is disaster recovery. And that's really the concept of having your systems and your data back up and running as quickly as possible. So you have a process and a procedure for when something impacts your business in your IT systems, these are the steps I have to take to get back up and running. So the idea around that is we can make this procedure and test the procedure, and hopefully our tests are successful and we can keep fine-tuning this until we have our game plan. So understanding what that means will help as we go through this and talk to the evolution of DR and towards that concept of IT resilience and introduce you to what that means. So let's talk about what companies have done, and when you're defining your BCDR practice, how do you set these definitions around what your business actually needs? The first one is RPO, and I'm only listing these out again because I've gone to even IT conferences where people just don't use these terms, so you just throw out RPO and they say, what's that? Well, as soon as you explain it, they say, oh yeah, I know what that means. But recovery point objective is really how much data are you going to lose if an impact happens, and the business, from the business standpoint, have to understand when they're building their BCDR plan of how much data the business can actually afford to lose. So what I mean by that is nightly backups. If you're taking them every single night, maybe you're going back 24 hours, and that's how much data you know you can lose is up to 24 hours. But determine from a business standpoint if that's acceptable to you, and that's your RPO, your recovery point objective of when you need to get your data back from. And the other piece to that puzzle, as you're defining this practice, is your RTOs, recovery time objective, and that's how quickly you can get that back up and running. So I'll keep that simple. We'll dig into that a lot deeper later on, but just to make sure you can actually define these RTOs, meet the business needs, and actually prove that they're working. So typical data protection solutions, like we just talked about, backups are very, very common, and I'm not saying DR means you don't have backups, or IT resilience doesn't mean you have backups. People will still use some sort of methodology to capture that data and maybe keep it for long term and recover from certain things like file deletion or audits or something like that. But any type of disaster, power interruption, hardware failure, viruses or other types of infections, and then that human error factor on the right, just some examples. You're looking at that RPO of 24 hours maybe, sometimes even longer, because there are huge backup windows for the weekends, especially if you have large servers and maybe a slow medium. Hopefully you're not still going to a slow take, but I used to back when I was in that industry, and we would start jobs on Friday night, and sometimes they would end by Monday morning, and hopefully we'd get all of our data. But technology has changed. prices have become more competitive, or storage arrays that you're buying with all the shared storage is helping you define more choices where you can take storage-based snapshots, or if you're virtualized, you can take virtual machine snapshots. And depending on your workloads and the data rate of change, this window can be a lot smaller than 24 hours. It could be every hour, every 15 minutes sometimes. It depends on, again, how much data you have to move in that amount of time, but you can adjust this. And hopefully the technology and the way the industry has moved, you've been able to start taking advantage of some of these technologies and mix and match these as your workloads have those needs. So both of these are still very, very common, but they're not necessarily always geared towards being a true disaster recovery solution, because it also depends on how quickly these solutions allow you to get back up and running too. So either of those, if you're looking at a bigger window and a longer recovery time, equals data loss and downtime. We'll look at that in a little more detail later on too. So major disruptions are the norm. They're not the rare events. What do we mean by that? We have some exciting stories coming up towards the end of this webinar today, but people, when they usually are in their price list of IT budget spending, looking at disaster recovery solutions as an insurance policy. And when you think of something as an insurance policy, you try to weigh your risks and you try to figure out if it's actually worth you doing or if you can hold off a little longer. And you've probably been down this road before, but if not, you may. Hopefully you don't, but things do happen, and you start planning for how do you recover very quickly, more rapidly, how do you upgrade your systems and buy new solutions. And I did that as well. I presented solutions to my management, my upper management, and they declined it, thinking we don't need this insurance policy. We do backups every week and every night, so it's not a big deal. Well, an outage actually did hit us about a month later, and it caused about 3 days worth of downtime for the Exchange server at the time. And everybody had to go to pen and paper. Nobody had calendars because nothing got printed out. And it caused a huge uproar, and of course them coming back to IT saying, why didn't we have a better solution? Why didn't we have a DR plan? We can't live off of backups all the time for everything. And that's the mindset here. But major disruptions are happening just like that. And they're not rare events that you have to think about insurance policies, where it depends on your region. If you live somewhere where there's a higher chance of flooding or hurricanes, that's one thing, but maybe you're not planning for a volcano because they're not in your area. So looking at those types of events that hit you, there have definitely been a lot more natural disasters in the world in the last couple of years, and it's actually been impacting more people. And I think that's brought more awareness to this conversation today, BCDR, in that people know it's coming and they might fail over to another data center that's in the same locality that's still going to be hit by the storm. So they are hitting, but think about all these other things impacting your industry as well and your organization. If we're only accounting for a small percentage, depending again on your region, it could be easier for you to dismiss a DR plan and a DR strategy as I might not ever need it. But you need to protect against those natural disasters, and you have to protect against all the other things that are going to happen. If the generator fails, people say, no big deal, I have another generator, I have this or I have that. But I've seen backup generators fail, I've seen power lines get cut, and you try to build resilience and you try to build these systems, but you didn't think of your original DR plan as protecting against those failures, so you have a different policy and a different procedure. Well, you need to start categorizing those as outages that can impact your IT organization, so you can build your solution around this and get the help you need to satisfy against these types of disasters, including flooding and fire and natural disasters as well. So that should help you from the business standpoint get the buy-off and the buy-in you need from your upper management as well. Now, that big list in that circle was what we think about when we think about disaster recovery. We think about outages that are something went wrong in my environment and I need to get back up and running. So think about things like all the other pieces that you're causing, application upgrades or patches when you're trying to upgrade your servers. Those things are outages that you make maintenance windows, so it's actually acceptable to have some downtime for that. But what happens when they go wrong? Not only do you have all these outages of unplanned downtime, but now you're looking at your planned downtime, your maintenance windows, your upgrades, and I could almost build this left panel over here of unplanned downtime and put it on the right again, because sometimes these planned downtime scenarios cause more unplanned downtime. Your upgrades go bad, you might not be able to roll back, or if you roll back, it might impact some other system and some sales that came in during that process or something. You have these procedures like data center migrations and data center consolidations that you try to test as much as you can. You try to find all the anomalies that can go wrong with firewall rules and licensing changes and MAC address changes. And when these things happen, if you haven't tested it, it could cause a pretty big outage, and it could actually mean rolling back and rescheduling. And that can actually cost your business a lot more money in trying to reschedule these and get people back on board for the nights and the weekends to actually do these migrations and hope they actually work. So resilience is not about just the unplanned downtime, but also the planned downtime. How does your strategy satisfy all those types of outages, from human errors and natural disasters to infections and deletions, to all those planned downtimes that are either taking too long in their own right? Migration windows are still really, really large in the general plan as those get rolled out. But if you can't properly test it, or something goes wrong and you can't react and recover very, very quickly, you're causing more and more outage. And the bottom line is, no matter what you're in the business with, if you're a 9-to-5 shop or you're 24/7, everybody needs to think of their business as 24/7. We have global time zones, so you're extending beyond that 9 to 5 just for that reason alone. But even if you hang up your phone at 9 or at 5 o'clock and go home, somebody's probably trying to get on their Palm Pilot, I'll say, right? Go old school. And they're trying to look at their emails, they're trying to reply to something before they forget, or somebody's trying to buy something from your website. So they need it up on the weekend, on these busy times. So your business is 24/7, and you need to treat it that way. Even in the concept of backup windows, if that's all you're trying to do for DR, if your backup window is 24 hours, you can't have systems down or really, really slow during that time, because people are trying to access and use your systems. And that's why we talk about the evolution of IT towards IT resilience in looking at how the industry's changed over the years. So even in the time that I've been in the field, since early days of virtualization, from a VMware standpoint, from that vendor, I guess, we look at moving from physical servers to the virtual world. And why do we do that? We build physical servers with resilience, right? Every time we figure out a bottleneck or something going wrong, from building your first server to saying, I need multiple hard drives in case one fails, oh, now I need multiple power supplies in case one fails, and now I need to put those into different UPSs, each power supply separately. So you keep adding resilience into your local infrastructure, multiple switches, multiple racks, all these different pieces to your clustering and all these services. But you're still locked into that hardware. It's still very difficult to recover those servers. If something goes wrong, you're locked into that layer. So virtualization came along and said, you know what, not only are we underutilizing these physical servers and taking up a lot of real estate, but it's really hard to recover, and it's not very quick. So I've had servers crash where it took more than a day to recover, because we had to order parts off of eBay on a server that wasn't made anymore. So you have to wait till the exact part comes in before that server will work again. Well, virtualization is all about abstraction, right? Abstracting that compute layer, so the servers, the virtual servers running on top of that actual hardware, that bare metal hardware, have no idea what brand they're on besides that virtualization brand. So they can move between different brands of hardware and not care. It's invisible to them, and it makes it really, really quick to just move those machines around and recover them really quickly. So IT evolved. People still use physical servers. Some have a need, or some just haven't fully bought off on the idea of virtualization. But I will tell you, in my experiences, that a lot of big enterprises and small are going with a virtualization first policy, just to ensure that it used to be the opposite way around, where you had to prove you needed a VM. But in these days, it's IT saying, you need to prove to me why you need a physical server, because a VM will do everything you need. So you move from that virtualization first policy and say, okay, I'm not locked into the hardware anymore, but I don't want to be locked into my infrastructure either, from all the other pieces, the networking layer, the firewalls, the storage. So let's abstract more layers, and we move towards this SDDC, or the software-defined data center. And that's all of these pieces right here, and abstracting those away from the hardware. So if I move to different networking or move to different storage, my workloads on top of that just don't care what's going on underneath. So it makes it very, very easy to adopt new technology and make my workloads more mobile, get my workloads to the cloud that I need to really, really quickly without a whole lot of configuration changes. And then next up, the more you become software-defined, the easier it is to become more cloud-like. So you can have a private cloud running your own data center, owning your own stuff, and making it more automated to make it more like a cloud. Some people don't consider their private infrastructure to be cloud-like because they haven't put certain portals in there, but you don't need it. You just need to be more automated, have some consistency and recoverability. But yes, the more software-defined you are, the more cloud-like you are. And then there's the public cloud and the hosted cloud up there where somebody else is running it and you're just putting your workloads there, or you're sometimes managing your own workloads up there. And then up top we see hybrid cloud, and that's really connecting two disparate clouds together. Usually it's a private cloud environment connecting to a public or hosted cloud environment, but now you're hybrid. You can have workloads in either place, talking to each other, communicating, or use one of those sites in this context for disaster recovery. So we have to evolve beyond just disaster recovery and think IT resilience. And that's because when you say disaster recovery, in your mind you think insurance policy or you think major outage. But what else is impacting your business that you're not categorizing correctly? That's IT resilience. And with IT resilience, you can do what you're supposed to do. You can focus on the business. Okay? You don't need to be in the space of managing and maintaining a data center. So before we jump into more of the cloud conversation, I'm going to take a step back from that stepping stone chart we just saw and look at a pretty recent example of a business that actually was impacted and what happened to them. So a quick story, pretty large infrastructure, about 80,000 employees, some good revenue, and 180 applications with multiple VMs and servers per application, or physical servers per application in their Atlanta data center. And the biggest problem they had when something happened was they had a power issue and their backup UPS failed. And I know this isn't made up because I've had this happen and I've worked with other customers that this happened to as well, for multiple reasons, whether it's fuel not getting to you in time, or because of a natural disaster not allowing the trucks to get to your generator, or it's someone forgot to plug it back in when they were doing testing. So big problems. But what did this impact? They had no DR site and they didn't have virtualization, so it's even harder for them to mobilize. And it impacted a lot of customers for a lengthy amount of time. But in today's world of instant social media gratification, they had huge negative press and image, because as soon as people start posting and putting all these messages on social media, people start writing blogs about it, and it just becomes a nightmare. So during that time of outage too, the bottom line here is no new bookings were coming in. The compensation loss from all the people, all your experts are in this together trying to get everything back up and running. So they're ignoring their day job and they're trying to get this working, and it's tons of revenue lost. So their first problem with no DR site, it's not resilient to outages. It's very, very difficult to test, and no guarantee you can get back up and running in any certain period of time. Because first of all, you don't know if your site's going to be obliterated and it just doesn't exist anymore, so you have to rebuy everything and bring it up somewhere else. But you can build a second site, just like you can duplicate everything inside one site, you can duplicate it somewhere else, and at least you have another facility to bring your applications back up, and hopefully you can guarantee recovery by testing it, which is a challenge if any of you test site to site. In some cases, if it's not done with a full, smooth game plan, which you'll hear about later, then it can be really challenging to test, and some organizations just either don't test or never test successfully, right? You talk about those RPOs and RTOs, and if you can't meet them, then you still don't have a true DR plan that you can count on. So the second problem here was no virtualization. And without it, again, it's very complex. You are locked in, and it can still take days to recover because each server you have to recover takes a lot of time and hand-holding, and then you extrapolate that to tens or hundreds or thousands of servers, and that takes just a lot of time. So a lot of people make plans where they tier it and say, these 25 servers have to be up on the first 3 days, and then these 25 in the next week. And that just means it's taking you weeks or months to get your entire infrastructure back up to where it was. So some people just aren't working. Very hard to test. So virtualization comes along again and encapsulates that, abstracts the workload from the physical hardware and says, now we have all these containers, so to speak. I don't want to use that term too much since it's a different terminology today in the virtual world, but I can now grab those and move them somewhere else and recover them and boot them back up on other hardware. So it makes it very, very easy and opens up quite a few more DR options. Now, in that evolution of IT, people do virtualize physical servers, but they usually don't take the time to change the way those servers were built. They're just mimicking them or actually making them exact conversions into a virtual machine, and they're still using legacy technologies, maybe backups, maybe sometimes the tape still. But you do look at still running those backups, you have data loss of 24 hours, recovery in 24 hours. So you're still using old processes when your technology, your virtual machine, would actually allow you to do better things, whether that's through snapshots or some other medium to have quicker recovery. And it's very limited in its use case. Replication, storage replication, or virtual machine replication still means data loss in hours. It still isn't tested all the time. Most people don't even test twice a year. And again, if they do, they have a hard time meeting their SLAs they defined. IT has evolved, just like we talked about, the physical and the virtual layer. Now we'll dig into moving up into that cloud space, because the cloud is at a tipping point. Many, many businesses do run completely on premises, and there are also organizations that are 100% in the cloud. Some big ones too, where they don't want to own anything. And you can be a mix of both. Really, having a hybrid cloud strategy is all about understanding what you want to try to do next and what your options are. It might mean in today's world you don't want to try cloud yet, but you don't need to be afraid of it. You just have to understand what to look out for and how to start adopting this. And because we're talking about DR today, that is a great way to actually start digging your toes into the cloud, is saying, I'm going to utilize someone else's cloud and have it as a secondary site so I don't have to own my own. So what does that mean? Let's look at DR AAS, or disaster recovery as a service, if you've heard some of these as a service terms. But I can really reduce my cost and increase my scalability. Why is that? When I buy a second data center, I have double of everything plus double of the management maintenance, not just the hardware and the cooling and the licensing and the leases. You're locked into leases as well, where you can't even move to a better site or a better location or a smaller site if you need it. But it's unpredictable, and you don't know what you're going to need to run on either site. You're trying to utilize both of them in some capacities. So it gets very complicated and very, very challenging. Doesn't mean you can't do it. But moving to DR as a service is the pay-as-you-go type of mentality. Only pay for what you need. Yeah, there is flexibility in saying I want to pay for a certain amount every month and know that I have this, or I can just pay as I use it. But you have a site somewhere else. You do have the flexibility to migrate your workloads to that cloud if you need the extra space or the workloads. Or some people say, I'm going to migrate to the cloud and stay there. I actually like the way it runs up there. And again, I don't want to deal with my own data center. I can go DR back to my data center if I want, or DR to another cloud. But I have that flexibility, and I can make that choice anytime I want, because that cloud provider is going to open it up and give me that access when I need it. So you don't have the cost or the headaches of server and storage refreshes, application upgrades as far as the infrastructure goes. So you don't have to think about that anymore and plan that all out. You just have your workloads running, and they need to worry about that. Set it and forget it mentality, where, yeah, you'll have sometimes the costs shift from OpEx to CapEx or the other way around, but it's predictable because you know exactly what your workloads will take and what services you're getting for that price. So you remove those hidden costs, and it's all up front, and you're really leaving the services in the hands of the experts. Even in the DR mentality mindset, if you're practicing your disaster recovery scenario once a year or twice a year or even once a quarter, that's 4 tries for a weekend at a time. And I have worked with organizations in the past that have a whole week that they shut down their company and don't do any code development, don't process anything, because they're doing their DR practice. It's mandatory that they actually fail over and try it, but it requires a big outage. And 2 weeks before that is code freeze and all these other things, just because. So think about that outage window, and if it doesn't work, then you're in trouble. But they know their process, at least. It's just not very fast, because they're only doing it a few times a year. These people that are storage experts and experts in all these other areas aren't doing DR day to day. So if you work with a DR as a service provider, they're doing this every single day, multiple times a day in some cases, from all these different types of disasters, customers of all shapes and sizes, different types of workloads. So they're the experts in this, and you can leave it in their hands. So what are the key questions to ask as we go through this? I have about 8 or 10 of these, and then I'm going to hand it over to Becky to give you some more insight into some cool information as well. But first off is, can you see your RPO? Remember, your recovery point objective is how much data am I going to lose, or how much data can I afford to lose? I say it both ways because sometimes the technology you're investing in defines how much you're going to lose, but your business still has to be able to determine how much they want to be able to lose. If you can only afford the 24-hour, which again, in today's world, that's not the case because all this technology does give you more flexibility. But if your business needs to be up and only lose 5 minutes of data or an hour of data, you really shouldn't be getting a solution that puts you back 24 hours. So, but it's very, very challenging to see this. If you think about your own industry, even if you're just using a couple of solutions of backups and storage and all these different technologies working together, they don't have visibility into each other usually. So you have to call these teams and say, hey, what state is this at? And can you tell me if this is even working? Or where are these machines I'm replicating? And what time did that happen? Because I have to correspond that with something else. So how do I understand my total amount of data loss between all my servers, my workloads? It's very, very challenging to see RPO. And there are ways we can help you with that too as we talk through this. Second up is RTO. Remember those SLAs of setting my RPO and RTO for my BCDR strategy. But can I test it? And do I get a report to say I tested these, this is how long it took, I defined it as passed or failed, and it shows me which servers booted and in what order and all the actions that had to happen. If you can do this and sign off on it, you can prove your RTO. And again, that can be really, really challenging and a very manual process, but you want to work with this cloud provider that actually has the ability to give you everything you need, and it's very, very easy and quick. And that bleeds into the next two topics here as testing. Can I test my design? You want to do that for multiple reasons. If you're looking at just dipping your toes into DR as a service, for example, and maybe just replicating 25% of your workloads up there, maybe not 100% for some reason, you're just trying it out. You want to make sure you have enough capacity there. Some people, when they build their own DR site, they don't think about things like, it's a DR site, I'll put my old hardware there and I'll leave my good hardware on my site, and because I can't afford 2 of these really expensive things that are really fast. But if you actually have to fail over, they're usually counting on the fact that something happened and they're out for a day or 2. They can deal with being on slower hardware, but what happens if you actually lost your site and you can't get it back for a month? Can you run in that DR site for that long? Do they have the capacity? Is your hardware fast enough, or are your users going to now complain that everything's really, really slow, even though it's up? So being able to test for performance reasons, but also being able to test that applications come up correctly. So if it's a performance thing, you don't have to worry with a cloud provider, because these clouds are looking at tons of state-of-the-art hardware, usually way above and beyond anything you'll have as far as software versions and hardware capacity, and they can just keep adding, and it's seamless to you. So they're always flexible and expanding. And the reason why I'm calling a lot of these out as we talk through this and dig a little bit into Zerto and Expedient's partnership here is this trusted partnership in what they offer. I want to talk about that, but the point of these slides too is to really open up your mind as far as what cloud means and help you understand that not all clouds are the same. I'm giving you some of these options of things to look out for. So if testing is important to you and you have to stay compliant, or you want to actually know that you can get your work back up and running, even if you didn't think you valued it that much, what would happen if you didn't have it? Not all clouds are the same. So don't be afraid of cloud, but know what questions to ask so you can have the confidence when you do actually try to adopt a cloud strategy. And that runs right into SLAs, our service level agreements. Sometimes you don't have choices, or just like your own RPOs and RTOs and what you think you can do for recovery, there are so many times people have defined, if I ask for a raise of hands right now, how many people have defined SLAs of RPO and RTO? They say, I have 4 hours of RPO and RTO. And then I ask, okay, well, that's wonderful. Everybody has this. They're compliant with their definitions. How many of you have ever met it with testing? And I usually don't see any hands, sometimes 1 or 2 in the audience. And the reason for that is if they were successful in their testing, they never got it down to 4 hours. And they're still struggling to get anywhere near that. Sometimes it's double that, triple that, more than a day. They at least know they can recover, but it's not where their business actually defined they had to be at. So telling me you have them was one thing, but telling me you can meet them is another. So working with a cloud provider know that you have the power of some of these wonderful partners in these disaster recovery as a service providers that can actually offer you 100% uptime in your SLA. And that's incredible. You don't have to worry about the service and support you need by smaller shops. And I'll give you an example as we talk about support too. I did work in a hosted provider, and this was a long, long time ago before it was called cloud, but it still was hosted, some shared environments and dedicated environments. But SLAs were a lot lower back then. 85% or 95% uptime is still a lot of downtime in a year. And when you think about your workloads, and the reason for that is I work third shift, and I was doing backup tape rotations and server upgrades, and sometimes those caused problems, but sometimes systems just went down. And I was new to the field, so usually systems that went down that I didn't know about or know how to maintain and manage myself, I had to call in the experts. And I had to wait for them to drive in, and remote connectivity wasn't as good as it is today. But it was still one person at night, and all that time that was taken, and it still happens today, is adding to RTO. So look for that cloud provider that has a team, a full team 24/7, not just the experts in 9 to 5, and then they're sleeping when you actually need them. Which ones are there? Can they help me set it all up? Can they help me get my solutions up and running? Help me pick the right solutions for the right workloads, because I might have physical servers, I might have virtual workloads, I might need some backup this and some backup that, or some DR for that. I need all this to work, and is part of my 100% uptime SLA mean they're going to handle it? Can I just call and say, hit the big red button and make sure I'm up and running in minutes, and I want you to handle it all? Can they? And then the fact is, will they? Can you look at success stories from customers to say, yes, they follow through every single time, and this is a cloud provider in a partnership that I want and I back fully. So, and another big piece to that is not just failing over, but am I offered more automation, automated failback. Some solutions have it built in, but working with the right provider that has the proper procedures and can do it quickly is really, really critical. So when a disaster strikes, I need to fail over. That's obvious. Some people worry about being locked in that fear of what happens once I'm there. If I repair my primary site, maybe I want to come back. I have heard stories of people saying, I actually like the way this DR site runs, and I'm going to keep my workloads there and maybe just use my site as DR once I get it up and running. But oftentimes people say, hey, I want to move back and protect back, or actually fail my workloads back so they're running primary back on my original site. So solutions help you fail over. There's automation and solutions and different products and solutions like Zerto's. And when you look at what providers like Expedient and this partnership has, is everything that goes above and beyond hitting the big red button in the software solution. Just moving workloads is one thing, or just getting them started, like starting VMs. You can sometimes script those, sometimes it's manual, but the more automation, the more human error you can remove, the better. But after that happens, there are a whole lot of other things. How do I access those virtual machines or those servers that are in the cloud now? Do my users hit the website and it's still trying to get back to my primary site? Is DNS going to update in 24 to 48 hours, or does it happen instantaneously? Is there redundancy built into all those services? What about my networking? Do I have to worry about servers breaking because everything changed, and some of them I can't have changed? So having all that stuff happen and fall into place in the right order and happen in minutes is critical, because again, you're 24/7 and minutes count. It's not, I'll wait for networking team to fix that in the next 3 hours, and then they'll send me an email and I'll go try to work with the backup team to get this data. You can't do that. You don't have time for that, and your services can't be down that long. Next up is the conversation of applications. So you're probably well aware that if I say a 3-tier application is a common terminology I use, where an application might be 3 different servers of a database server, application server, and a web front end. So you can log into the web server and it talks to the application server to run it and present data from the database or put data into the database. Well, in this scenario, if you can see the colors, I have VM from application 1, VM 1 here, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. And then I have a different color here, that's a different application. And then I have a third color over here with a different application. So if I'm replicating these or backing them up with different technologies at different times or different storage arrays or doing all these crazy things, someone has to keep track of that and figure out what's going on. If my machines move to different arrays and I'm taking advantage of that type of automation and redundancy, I don't know, again, how to prove my RPO, because if I recover one of these applications, some servers have a certain timestamp, others might be 8 hours behind or 24 hours behind. So what's lost? What's actually going to work and what's not going to work? And that's why earlier I said RPO isn't just talking about that data, but it's talking about, or getting the systems up, it's actually getting them usable as well. So if I can just categorize these and group these machines into virtual protection groups, where no matter what happens on the back end, I'm protecting an application, so I know all of them are replicated from the same point in time. It actually makes it quite easy to not worry about them anymore and recover them very, very rapidly and know they're going to work. So that's how we evolve to minimize that impact. And having these choices and knowing that this technology is out there is really the point of this. If you're used to what you're doing and you defined your BCDR strategy years ago, it's time to rethink that, because technology, as we talked about, it's changed a lot, and even the competitive pricing isn't like it used to be. You have to look at the whole picture, and this is a very rudimentary one disaster striking a business of, I think this is, $100 million annual revenue, but looking at maybe a less expensive solution of backups, where you have a typical RPO and RTO of 24 hours, maybe it costs the least amount. It's cheaper than storage-based replication, but the impact of the business and that outage of all my data loss and those things we talked about earlier, the company image and the downtime and no incoming transactions, means a huge impact. Where these other solutions that we can now take advantage of, reducing my RPO and RTO with snapshots and having a lower business impact, or even going to abstract that replication layer. Remember that software-defined data center conversation, you can abstract the compute and the networking and security, the storage, and you can also abstract the replication. Put that in the hypervisor so we don't care about what's going on underneath. Makes it very, very rapid, and you have insight into what's going on, but you can also rapidly recover because you're hooked into that virtualization layer in that platform and that technology that enables that speedy recovery. So build in orchestration and automation, recover workloads very, very quickly in minutes, and here you see an RTO of 15 minutes. And the impact is really, really small. So looking at the whole picture and categorizing all your disasters correctly, you can take those impact numbers and really build your business case, because again, downtime isn't just the data loss, but how long does it take you to recover? Oops, sorry. I keep doing that. And then I think right here in the second one after downtime and data loss is where people go wrong, and they say, yeah, my RTO is recovering my servers. But you think about that application mentality from the previous slide of, if my application doesn't actually work, someone has to look at the database, figure out what's wrong. I'm recovering that just to a working state, and then I might be able to do data entry for all that data I lost. Sometimes I can't if I don't have records of it. So pieces are missing, and I'm in different states, and that's all part of your RTO in my point of view. Okay, it's not just getting a server up and running and IT handing it off to the application owner saying, yep, we're recovered really quickly. And the application owner says, no, I'm still down for 8 more hours. I have to figure this all out and talk to the database people and see what's broken and how to fix it, because timestamps are off and logs are broken and all these other pieces. So I hope that helps you understand why we need to move to IT resilience, how cloud providers can help you, and help you understand that we, as this partnership with Expedient and what they have to offer, is amazing, and they help us and help you through your journey of not only picking different products, but the true solution, because they're the experts in this. They know how to analyze your workloads, look at your needs, and with that, I want to hand it over to Becky.
Thank you, Harry. Can everybody hear me? Are we good to go?
Yes, yeah. Perfect.
Wonderful. So thanks very much. I'm so happy to come in after the questions to ask section, because I'm actually going to introduce the solution that answers all of those questions the way that it should be answered, the way that Harry intended them to be answered. So Expedient's push-button DR solution does permit automatic failover and subsequent failback at the push of a button. We leverage software-defined networking to enable the ability to seamlessly and completely fail over your network without DNS or IP changes. And that, as Harry mentioned earlier, significantly reduces the RTO from what could be hours into just minutes. And our clients actually regularly demonstrate an RTO of sub 15 minutes in their use of push-button DR. So I encourage everyone to check out our website, expedient.com, and read a little bit more about push-button DR. But we have a case study that on the next slide, Harry's going to jump over, of a client who actually did achieve that sub 15-minute RTO in a recent preemptive failover. So this is an amazing story that we've recently published, and I love sharing with prospects and customers, because about 2 months ago in September 2017, as Hurricane Irma was approaching Florida, our customer, Bouchard Insurance, used push-button DR to proactively fail over from their production environment in Florida to one of our data centers nearly 1,000 miles away, which is just kind of the best case scenario for disaster recovery, as you all can imagine. Bouchard is a Florida-based personal and commercial insurer. Given their location and their line of business, they obviously have a very specific and heightened need for business continuity, which is even more great during the time of a natural disaster when their clients are looking to them to, issue or file claims and start the claims process. So perhaps even adding another level of complexity, Bouchard was also very cognizant of the fact that in the event of a natural disaster, given their locations in Florida, their own employees needed to be available to take care of their homes and families, in addition to making sure that the Bouchard systems were up and running. So when Bouchard's director of IT, we can back it up a little bit. When Bouchard's director of IT joined the company about 18 months ago, he actually initiated a DR evaluation that had several key criteria that he was looking for. He was looking for vendors or partners that could have the technical expertise for successful disaster recovery of a virtual desktop environment, which is a unique environment for disaster recovery. He was also looking for a partner who had the ability to fail over to a geographically diverse backup site. So he talked to several folks who had backup sites in Florida, which wasn't going to do him a whole lot of good. And he was also looking for, again, that ability to fail over the network without changing IP or DNS, which was super critical for him, again, because of that RTO, that recovery time objective. Out of 4 providers that the director of IT at Bouchard evaluated, only Expedient was able to meet all of his criteria. So once implementation happened and everything was up and running, Bouchard was actually really diligent in its DR testing. So again, a nod to one of Harry's questions to ask, can you test? Yes. And Bouchard tested frequently. I think that Brian, the director of IT, told me he tested between 6 and 8 times between implementation and then the case that we're talking about right now. So he ran frequent and complete DR tests to the point that he had his staff running off of the backup site, not production, for days at a time to ensure that everything was working. That diligence really paid off. Bouchard had total confidence in push-button DR as its solution in order to proactively fail over, which they did 3 days before Hurricane Irma was due to make landfall. So Bouchard was watching the weather forecast and knowing that Irma was going to hit their location, and they decided to proactively, preemptively fail over. Within just 12 minutes, they did perform the failover using push-button DR and confirmed the systems were functioning at the backup site. They then proceeded to run off the backup site at our facility 1,000 miles away for about a week, and then they failed back to their primary site, their production site in Florida, once Irma and the threat of damage from the hurricane had passed. So we were thrilled to hear this story. They were thrilled to have push-button DR on their side, and we couldn't be happier that this was actually one of those. If there could be a happy DR story, this was one where we weren't using push-button DR in the face of an active disaster, but they had the foresight and the forethought to do this in advance of the hurricane making landfall.
Yeah, I love that story. I just wanted to add, it's we talked earlier about DR and outages like this being not as frequent as all the other outages, but we're hearing it more and more lately, and I've heard the same stories that you're telling, and our customers are doing this. They're not waiting for the disaster to hit them. They want to get out of the way. They know it's not impactful to fail over and be running somewhere else. And yeah, like you said, worry about their own personal life while this is happening. So and they're moving their workloads ahead of time just to make sure they're not worrying about it then and waiting for it to fail. So it's really nice, and that same mentality is for seasonal burstability too. Getting your workload somewhere else to get more expansion on your workloads. So it's huge.
Yeah, he's been thrilled. We, as I said, couldn't be happier. with the story. But I think key to that too, and again, a nod to the questions to ask, he did very much emphasize, Brian did, his level of testing. So he wasn't taking any chances, right? And I think it's important to note that having the solution is part of it. You do want to test, you do want to make sure that everything is functioning as you expect it to, so that you can have this complete confidence in the time that you need it most.
Yeah, exactly.
You can pop over to our next slide. So who is Expedient? Probably could have used this 3 slides ago, but it's okay. We're a cloud computing and data center infrastructure as a service provider. We've got 11 data centers in 7 markets, including Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Columbus, Indianapolis, Memphis, Baltimore, and Boston. And our technology experience really enables our customers to focus on innovation and maintaining their competitive advantages. So to Harry's point, lean on the experts, which we obviously consider ourselves to be, so that you can focus on your business. And again, that's what Bouchard did with disaster recovery in the face of Irma. A couple of accolades that you see on the screen, so happy to toot our own horn here. In June of this year, we made our debut on the Gartner Magic Quadrant for Disaster Recovery as a Service. More than 500 providers were evaluated on criteria including completeness of vision and ability to execute. And we were one of just 23 providers positioned in the report, which you can get a free copy of by going to expedient.com/magic. Just fill out a quick form and you can download the report and read kind of the evaluation of the 23 providers and really the state of disaster recovery right now. So even if you're, it's just an informative report overall, and then you can get kind of a deep dive on those 23 solutions providers. We're also proud to have been named a top 10 managed services provider worldwide by MSP Mentors, made that list also this summer of 2017. And again, this year we've made appearances on the CRN Data Center 100 and the CRN Solution Provider 100. And as both Pam and Harry said, we're super proud to be a Zerto partner and have a great relationship with Zerto, which does power our disaster recovery solutions. And if you're interested in learning more, you can definitely visit expedient.com and check out our entire suite of solutions, our cloud and our IaaS solutions as well. I'm going to toss it back to you, Harry.
Well, thank you so much. And yeah, we're always happy to be part of this relationship and the trusted advisors through this. So we're glad you have these amazing success stories in any type of disaster, and you guys are the experts. So thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Pam.
Yes, so thank you to all the attendees today. If you have urgent follow-on discussions that you'd like to get started with, please do note the email addresses on the screen. You can contact Becky now or go directly to Expedient, and Harry also is happy to take any further questions. We'll complete questions in email format. So Becky, Harry, thank you so much for joining us today, and everyone have a good rest of your day.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.